You know, before we all started talking about the cloud, there was this other big idea, the grid. Today, we're going to dive into the story of one single database release that honestly laid the foundation for how pretty much every major company operates today. This wasn't just another update. No, this was a full-on revolution. This is the story of Oracle 10G.
Okay, so to really get why this was such a huge deal, we've got to rewind the clock. Let's go back to the early 2000s. The internet is just blowing up, right? Data is exploding everywhere, and businesses are hitting a major wall. Their entire computing setup was, well, it was rigid. If you needed more power, your only option was to go out and buy a bigger, way more expensive server. And that whole process, it was slow, it was super costly, and just incredibly inefficient.
And then, bam! 2003 rolls around, and Oracle answers the call with an absolute bombshell. This wasn't just, another version with a few tweaks. This was a complete, fundamental rethinking of what enterprise IT could be. This was the arrival of Oracle Database 10G.
And you know what's so cool about this? It's right there in the name. That G, it wasn't just a letter they tacked on. It stood for grid. And that simple letter represented this incredibly bold, almost sci-fi vision for what the future of computing was going to look like. This was so much more than just clever marketing. It was a mission statement.
So what exactly was this grid? Well, at its core was a single, really powerful idea that would completely change how companies thought about their entire infrastructure.
The big idea here was called grid computing. And just think about it like this. Instead of having to rely on one single, massive, super expensive server, what if you could just connect a whole bunch of smaller commodity servers and storage units together? And what if you could make them all act as one giant virtual supercomputer? Well, that's the grid. A totally flexible, super powerful pool of resources that everyone could share. The payoff for this was just enormous. All of a sudden, a database wasn't trapped inside a single physical box anymore. It could dynamically grow or shrink, automatically shifting work between different machines to handle these huge spikes in demand. I mean, this unlocked a whole new level of efficiency and scalability that people had only dreamed of.
But look, having a great vision is one thing. Actually making it happen required some serious next-level tech. So how in the world did Oracle actually pull this off?
So, making this whole grid thing a reality, it really came down to three key innovations. Obviously, you have the grid computing architecture itself, but backing that up were two other absolutely critical pieces of the puzzle. Something called Automatic Storage Management, or ASM, and a brand new utility they called DataPump. All right, first up is ASM. Before this came along, managing storage was a total manual nightmare for database admins. ASM just automated the whole thing. It would intelligently spread data across a bunch of different disks, which not only saved your bacon if one of those disks failed, but it also massively boosted performance, all without a person having to constantly babysit it. And then you had DataPump. Back in the day, moving huge amounts of data around for a migration or a backup was a painfully slow process. DataPump was this new high-speed tool that made these jobs dramatically faster and way more reliable. So the bottom line is, Oracle didn't just have the big idea. They built the tools you needed to actually manage the grid.
So, with the vision and the tech all in place, the impact on the real world was, well, profound. This wasn't just some interesting technical experiment. It completely transformed how businesses all over the globe operated.
This quote really just sums it all up perfectly. With 10G, the database stopped being just a place where you stored data. It became the central, intelligent foundation for a company's entire operation. It was a true paradigm shift.
And this had a massive impact on the poor folks who actually had to run these systems. I mean, features like automatic storage management, they just radically simplified the life of a database administrator. All of a sudden, those endless hours of painful manual tuning and complicated management work, they just plummeted. And that freed up IT teams to actually focus on building cool new things instead of just, keeping the lights on.
So who was using all this new power? Well, the biggest players on the planet. We're talking global banks processing millions of transactions a minute, huge telecom companies managing vast networks, and even governments running their most critical infrastructure. They could now scale their operations with a level of confidence that was just impossible before.
So, now that we can look back on it, what's the real legacy of the grid? Well, its influence is absolutely everywhere, even if we don't use that name much anymore.
Oracle 10G truly was the dawn of a new era. The key ideas it brought to the table, pooling resources, scaling up and down whenever you need to, and automating all the management, that became the fundamental blueprint for pretty much all modern IT. It turned the database into this grid of possibilities that we are still building on today.
And that brings us to one last thought here. Think about it. Pooling together these huge networks of servers and storage to give you computing power whenever you need it. Does that sound familiar at all? Yeah, that revolutionary grid from back in 2003 was in so many ways the direct ancestor of the cloud platforms we all live on today. Which really leaves us with one big question, right? What's the next grid going to look like?